We'll call the policy committee meeting of the Madison Board of Ed. Starting at 6:30. We have sadly no more easy policies to rescind. Everything is going to take. So we will start with the first policy on the agenda, policy 1361, visitors and observations in the schools. And there's an associated regulation with it. We should have the notes from Shipman and Goodwin in your packet. So Shipman and Goodwin noted that Governor Lamont recently signed into law Public Act 25-1, which among other things addresses immigration enforcement activity at schools. They revised the model policy to clarify that in the event that a federal immigration authority appears in person at a school under the Board of Ed's jurisdiction or otherwise contacts the school to request information, the immigration authority shall be directed to communicate with the administrator designated for such interactions, which will follow protocols outlined in the school's security and safety plan. So you will note in the policy the changes in the first two paragraphs, and then my one question about this would be lines 27 and 28. I sort of question why this is added into the policy, and this is the line that starts on line 25. All visitors and observers permitted into school buildings or on school ground must comply with all school health and safety protocols in place at the time, and then they've added including but not limited to any health screening or personal protective equipment protocols. And when we've been going through all the policies, we've been pretty much like removing all of the COVID related wording. So I'm kind of wondering why this is in here, like why they decided to add it in. I don't know if it was just like a different lawyer that looked at it, but I don't really see the need to put it in because if you say school health and safety protocols in place at the time, I don't see why we need to specify, and I feel like it's pointless because hopefully we're never doing that again.
Hopefully, and yeah, there would be a lot. It would have to happen before get to that point. Certainly, you know, their policies changed, altered, reflected that language. So
we've been removing that sort of language from our other
I don't
policies.
have any problem with that unless you say anything. We wanted to bring the recommendation to you, obviously, from the law firm, but am I missing something?
I think it's more that you could visitors to school, you could tell them to remove something. Someone came to the door, not that they had to put something on necessarily, but just
if they were wearing a mask, that they would have to remove it.
right, like for identification purposes, I think. Is that another way you could look at it, but we can just delete it either way.
I think we should delete it. Galen? Comments?
I'm okay with deleting it because it doesn't really say. Well, yeah. I don't.
I don't know, I want to hear more about, so what was your thought on it?
That was a theory, I'm not an attorney, so we.
You're not.
Yeah. Let's play one on TV.
I never thought of it that way, but I would still think that would be that health and safety protocol in place at the time. So I think we should delete it. Are you okay with that? All right. I mean, we can bring it up again, you know, when we move it forward to the board. But let's cross off the starting at including through line 28. So that'd be that one thing. And then the rest of it is sort of like updated definitions of what a federal immigration authority is, blah, blah, blah. And there's the new data general statutes, other legal references that have been added. So my only other question with this would be, they refer in the policy to line 40, excuse me, who will follow the protocols outlined in the school's security and safety plan. So our security and safety plan is not included in our packet. So
That was the second meeting tonight.
yes.
Yeah, so that was,
So-
we were gonna review at a high level the safety and security plans, which
Right.
are very confidential, they're not published, but there are. Zoe is the kind of the coordinator of that, and it works with myself and the principals, police chief. You know, Sam DeBurr goes through all that, but there's different pieces of that. We are required to have a new one regarding immigration. And that's part of that's one of the
So-
sections.
Would our policy or our plan, the security plan that we have that would encompass the federal immigration or ICE, would that be able to be made public? Or is that also gonna stay with the more confidential safety and security?
It wouldn't be public, but we have shared basically our process, which we have I'll just summarize it for you. We have a lead person in each building, which is basically the principal. Gail, myself, and Zoe also know all the information. If we were to have someone come in with a subpoena, they were there to send a copy of the subpoena to one of the three of us. We have the attorney's contact information, send it to them, have them read it. Be friendly, support them. Also, Madison PD would be contacted just to make sure we're following all the right protocols and take the attorney's advice is basically what we were told to do by Shipman.
So do we have like a support process for it's obviously would involve students. So would we have a support process for the students? Like you would call the social worker or something to come and, or I'm just wondering like, what can we tell the public if they ask, what does this mean?
Yeah, I had a related question, which is, this is very recent legislation, of course,
Right,
but have there been any incidents or any cases this year?
Not in schools, because what the reason why we've taken this action and received the advice from Shipman and the State Department of Ed is that they remove schools as being they say a sanctuary. But my understanding is that they're still going to honor that. For the most part. So I'm not aware of any situations, in Connecticut that or New England. There could be some nationally that I'm not aware of, but I don't think schools are being targeted for
And I know of a student in a different district who, this is not exactly on point, but who returned, she has dual citizenship, she returned to her native country and could not get back in. And how would that figure in for attendance? For example, that's not to be answered right now, but it happened, it could happen,
Right.
something to think about.
it's not out of the question.
Yeah, student is marked absent until they're disenrolled by the family, so we work with the family to see, what supports we can provide. Have information, do they have any time frame? Everything, and I'm understanding takes a very long time, so anything like that, I think we've been looking at a very long time, so.
So I guess again.
I
I
think
would-
colleges are dealing with that, or, seeing that at the college level, hear about it.
But I guess I just would like to have more transparency, I guess, with how, like, I know you just described how it would be handled, but is it written anywhere? So that if a parent was concerned about what the protocol would be, that they would have somewhere they could go instead of having to call and ask, where it might be outlined somewhere. If it's not in this policy verbatim what we do, then where is it? For them?
We do have a written protocol,
Okay.
we have. Not sent that out widely because it just is so much case by case basis, but we've had a lot of conversations with our administrators on it. On how to handle it, and
So
like
then-
you said, involvement of school counseling or someone else that the student may be close with to kind of assist, but. I've shared with my administrators that we have to be prepared, we could be, the first site, but I also think that there'd be other. Indications that this is happening in schools before we're gonna be asked to react to it.
So maybe then if a parent wants to know what the policy is. And they come to this policy and they see.
I've answered a
this-
couple of questions, yeah, I've answered more than one email on that, and I'm happy to share the protocols with the board. If you'd like.
I mean, would it be something that they would be able to access on, say, the website, or would they just have to call the administration and say?
They'd
what-
have to call, yeah,
Okay.
at this point. With
All right, I just wanted to clarify that.
case by case basis, yeah.
All right, so back to the policy. Is there anything else in this policy that anyone has comments or concerns on, questions? Anything? So are we good to, with the one change that we made? Move this forward for rescind and replace? You good with it?
Yes.
Down?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Moving on.
And the reg will hold until
Yeah.
after, obviously, the board receives that, but that's no issue
Okay.
until the policy's.
Well, I mean, in the regulation anyway, there wasn't that many changes. Oh, there was one typo, no, sorry, in the regulation, line 154. This is okay. There's like a zero instead of a, You saw it,
Yeah.
you see it, okay. Um. That was the only thing that I caught in that. Okay, so the red will go with the policy, but we will be discussing that at the next meeting. Okay, so then moving on to policy 5123, restorative practices response. So this is a new policy. In 2023, the General Assembly passed legislation now codified at Connecticut General Statute Section 10-222JJ, requiring each Board of Ed to adopt a restorative practices response policy to be implemented by school employees for incidents of challenging behavior or student conflict that is nonviolent and does not constitute a crime. Boards of Ed are required to adopt such policy by July 1, 2025. The policy directs the district's administration to develop a continuum of strategies to prevent, identify, and responding challenging behavior, including but not limited to bullying and harassment. So this is a new policy. And if you read through it, the one thing that I would say is that they keep saying in this that the strategies would be like spelled out in like a student handbook. And so I know we are redoing all of our student handbooks because we are obviously have a new building coming online, taking 2 offline, so lots of things are being changed. And I'm assuming also that we will see copies of those when they are ready.
Yeah, so we've been working on that. We've been training staff on restorative practices for years now, multiple, 3 to 4, even more years. And we have trainers that are trained as, training trainers for our staff who've done additional training. So we've done a lot of work. It's use of, say, mediation where possible, restoring something that you've done to the school community. If you've taken up class time by, being disruptive, kind of sharing with the class that shouldn't happen again, apologize for those types of things. But we have not gone away from as well the discipline that needs to be there, in addition to that or alongside that when things happen. So, we still will have the code of conduct that will say this is the discipline that's handed out and X, Y, and Z happens. So,
And this really overlaps too. We already have a bullying policy.
right.
And so it overlaps with that as well as the
Yes.
student discipline policy.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like a stupid policy, but we apparently have to have it, so.
This comes on the tail end of the school climate
Yes.
policies that we just did, and
Yeah.
I waited as long as possible to hopefully have the most current version. And 2 days after you approved it, they released this, which is supposed to go with it. I was like, this is good, okay. So now we're back with this. It's just a little add-on to what you already approved last meeting.
And it's more definitions than anything, really.
Yeah. I don't
Well,
know, it seems
can
like
I-
a policy that we didn't need to have, but apparently Hartford thinks we have to have it, so here we have it.
Check the box.
Yeah, can I
Yes.
ask a
Comments,
few questions on this?
Oh, hello, Seth, we can't hear you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Stop talking, Seth.
Wait, Seth, we can't hear you, so you gotta hang on.
Yeah. Hang on.
Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Yay,
Okay, thank you. And
Okay.
thank you, Zoe, for facilitating. I had some questions about this one. I reviewed it. I know we do already have a comprehensive school climate policy that includes the bullying and harassment. And we were required by the state to adopt that after we adopted. We were one of the first districts to have a policy on that. And then the legislature adopted a law that all the districts have to have a school climate policy. And the school climate policy includes having a school climate committee at each school and having the school climate like the designee or something. So my first question is, was this language provided by Shipman?
Yes.
can you turn the volume up just a little bit? Thanks.
Right, is that better?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hi, sorry, thank you. My first question, is this policy language recommended by Shipman? Is this their proposed language.
Yes,
Yes, it comes to us through Shipman, but the school climate. is
Collaborative.
a Collaborative.
And the state
Is
says support.
who developed it.
Okay, and then I notice in the last bullet point on the first page, around starting at 37, that we're required to have school climate improvement plans. I know we have school improvement plans. What is, I mean, do we already have these, or are we, is this something that we need to incorporate? Was there any amount of time that we were given to do this, by the law, the act?
I think you missed the beginning of the conversation about it where Dr. Cook said that we've already been putting into practice the training of all the administrators, et cetera.
Yeah, and school climate's one of the four pieces of the school development plan. So we've been working on that for a long time, whether, you know, it's student discipline data, teacher training, school climate, the surveys, things like that. So it's a little bit more wide encompassing, but I feel that we've met that through that work.
All right, I apologize. I did hear what you were saying, but I didn't really relate it to specifically the school climate improvement plan. And then it says that we need to use school climate survey data and other relevant information through a process that engages all members of the community, involves such members in a series of overlapping systemic improvements. I just want to, I mean, clearly if we've been working on it, this isn't any major imposition that needs to be done suddenly in the middle of a year that we've got a lot of flux going on or anything, is it?
So we did the school climate surveys this year. We do it every other year.
Yep.
And so it's actually nice data as we're closing the, you know, the two elementary schools and kind of mixing them together. So it was really helpful information that we did. But yes, we go through that process, and that helps inform that school development plan.
All right, and then the only other question I had, I believe, is by definition, bullying here includes cyberbullying, and are there? I don't want to necessarily inquire into specifics because I don't want to put you on the spot, or I just want to make sure that there's either regulation or process going on that addresses that aspect of it, because you know, I know that it does happen, and sometimes there is some cyberbullying that has an adverse impact on the school community and on education, the educational process. So I just want to make sure that there's a plan for addressing that aspect of it.
Yeah, so if it's on our computers, we have Securely to hopefully pick up pieces of that. Outside of that, we don't have a monitoring system, obviously, but we do get reports from students. That's typically where that comes from. We have training, we have anonymous reporting tools for them to do on that. So we do receive reports, as you shared, and address those as need be. There may also be Title IX implications there as well. So we follow that pretty closely.
Okay, and I'm only asking these questions because this is such a new policy and a new concept for us.
No, absolutely.
You know, I'm not trying to imply that we don't have any response to this. In fact, we're probably pretty far along. I just wanted to, you know, for the sake of the public, make sure that people know that we have been working on this and that it's not a whole bunch of new stuff to us. Thank you.
Okay, so Galen and Maureen, are you good with this and moving it forward?
Yes.
All right, moving on then to policy 5120.3.3, administration of medications. Seeing this one again and again and again. Under Connecticut law, qualified school employees may administer epinephrine with a cartridge injector to a specific student with a medically diagnosed allergic condition that may require prompt treatment to protect the student against serious harm or death, either with the written medication order of an authorized prescriber and the written authorization of the student's parent or guardian, or in an emergency without such prior written authorization, provided that a number of conditions are met. The law previously required qualified school employees who administer epinephrine for purposes of emergency first aid without prior written authorization to annually complete the training program developed by the Departments of Ed and Public Health in consultation with the School Nurse Advisory Council, described in Connecticut General Statute Section 10-212G. Public Act 24-93 expands this requirement to explicitly include employees who administer epinephrine with the written authorization of a parent or guardian and authorized prescriber. So the policy has been edited to reflect that change. So most of this policy is the same as before. We did change the word from paraprofessional to paraeducator throughout the policy. And then there is the addition of a definition of what a qualified school employee means. Most of this is the same except for a couple of the definitions and the fact that they added the line who has been trained in the administration of medication according to section J of this policy multiple times throughout the policy. Other than that, there's not a lot of changes, so I would let me just make sure there's not a large change at the end, if I remember correctly. If that is the case, the changes are the documentation of changing paraprofessionals to paraeducators, the part about section J and about which Connecticut general statutes. There is the entire part regarding bus drivers that has been deleted. So I don't know if our committee wants to consider asking for a waive of the second read, or if you want to just put it through with 2. And if there are any comments or questions about the rest of the policy. Thoughts, comments, Maureen?
I'm fine waiving the second read because they're such minor changes.
Galen?
Agreed.
Seth, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why they wholesale removed bus drivers. Are bus drivers not expected to also be able to administer epinephrine under the new rule?
Shipment includes that in case the bus drivers are our employees, and since they're Durham employees, they are trained by Durham. So
Okay.
they are required under the contract to notify Durham of the trainings we expect them to do. But that's not one that we personally handle. They handle it, yeah, for the drivers, because they hire drivers throughout the year. All our staff do it as part of their yearly training.
Are drivers expected to
Yes,
provide-
they are trained and expected to potentially have to use it. And I've heard of stories, not here, of drivers using it. Yeah.
Okay, so it's really just because we don't have direct control over the bus
Correct.
drivers. So we're
Yep.
removing it from the policy and doing it through contract. Okay, and they're required by law otherwise. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, so then we will ask to waive the second read on this one. And move it forward. I'd like to make a note that they're making some progress with the addition of the podiatrist. So, not quite there yet, but we're getting there. Okay, 5113, attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism. Shipman and Goodwin have revised the policy and the accompanying regulation in light of section 4 of Public Act 23-160, which addresses the right of a student who is also a parent to request permission from the Board of Ed to attend adult education classes. They added language to reflect the requirement established by section 16 of Public Act 22-47 that when a student is truant, the school district implement the truancy intervention model developed by the CSDE that accounts for mental and behavioral health. If the CSDE has developed such model, otherwise the district will implement a truancy intervention plan that meets state law requirements. They've also added flexibility to the ways in which parents and guardians can report student absences, and personnel can notify parents or guardians of student absences. And finally, they made technical and clarifying edits to the regulations and accompanying forms. So the policy itself, formerly student attendance, is now student attendance, truancy, and chronic absenteeism, 5113, relatively short edition of the Connecticut General Statute. I have a question though, as we have a first read on line 75 that says August of 24. We know like what happened after that? Did it get changed again? Just a thought. I'm assuming that something changed and so it just had to come through again. Anyway, the actual policy is so short and the only change is really the public act and the general statute that I would recommend waiving the second read if the committee so desires. Thoughts, comments?
It's fine.
Ian?
I agree.
And then, you read through the regulation. There was one edit.
Can I?
So we don't actually vote on the regulation changes, but I just wanted to point out the change about line 130 and 131. How is now the submission of report can be through an online system. And my edit was line 205. I think there's just a couple words missing. It said the student who is both one under 17 years of, I'm assuming age should be there, and two. So I think the word age and are missing from there. Do you see what I'm saying, Zoe?
Yep.
Age, comma, and to.
A parent may request permission from the board to attend adult education classes. The board may, by a majority vote of the members of the board present and voting at a regular or special meeting of the board called for such purpose, assign such student to adult education classes. So that was just a couple of words that were accidentally left out.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Because I was reading that part. Is it not a FERPA violation to have a public hearing to address this publicly and vote on it? I mean, wouldn't we go into executive session to discuss this and maybe come out and vote on the individual without using their name?
So the individual could waive it, or we could choose to handle it in an executive session as we do expulsion, I believe.
Would we have to?
I don't believe you'd have to, like I said, a student could waive, they can always waive their FERPA rights and say, you know, board has my permission, I would get that in writing, board has my permission to speak about, you know, me in public session.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be a little sensitive because if you have a child who's under 17 years old, who is a parent of another child, and they want to stop attending regular school and instead attend adult education classes. I mean, that seems like a kind of a hardship case, and I don't know that we want to subject them to public scrutiny any more than they need to be.
I agree with that. I don't think we should even be asking them to waive their right. Because they may, and that really isn't in their best interest to have their name in our public documents.
Sure, yeah, right, I think that I don't see anything in here and I'm not, you know, if and when this comes up, we can always check with Shipman, but I don't see any reason why person's name would need to be shared. You know, I think they wouldn't even need to necessarily be here because I don't imagine the board's gonna want a whole lot of information. You know, they qualify under number 4 and they're asking for this waiver as the board.
Well, any vote would have to take place
Yeah,
in
and then come
a
back.
regular meeting anyway.
You know,
Yeah.
So
student
you
A,
discuss it.
right,
We could discuss it in executive
executive
session.
session, and you vote student A is approved.
Does the policy need to say that though, that we'll discuss it in executive session?
No. Because my point is, if it was something that the person didn't, you know, somebody could say, I don't want you to talk about me in executive session, because so then they have the benefit of the whole
Yeah,
discussion.
I don't think we need to go into executive session. I think the easy response here is we just call them student A or student X or whatever, and we just talk about it generically.
Oh, good.
But I think that maybe the regulation should just reference that so that we remember to do it when we come across that
Oh, I
situation.
think you'll
Hopefully
remember.
few and far
He
between.
might not be here though, you never know. The policy could go on for a long time.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm assuming the superintendent.
I don't remember ever having to vote on this or anything, so.
And the August 20 date, that's the last date it was revised. Just should have said date of last revision instead of first read there.
Okay,
There's
thanks.
so many iterations of this policy that have existed that
Okay.
they get pretty messy.
Thank you. So, sorry, so Seth, you're saying you wanted the policy to say something about it or no?
is this the policy or the reg? I'm looking up to the.
It's the
This is
regular.
the regulation.
This is the reg. I'm fine if the reg says it. I just want there to be something in this reg, like maybe just add lop on to the end of this after 2 adult education classes, period. Um, you know, to facilitate this, the process will be done anonymously or something like, you know. I mean, as a board, we might need I'm trying to think of the legalities of this. We might need to have information on who the person is requesting it in order to vote, but we.
I don't
want
disagree
the
with that,
public-
but I think, don't you think though that anytime that we talk about any student, we always do it in executive session? It doesn't have to say it in our agenda. It doesn't have to say it in the policy. It's a known fact that you don't discuss personal names or facts in the
Yeah.
public session.
Well,
So I
and
think
maybe
it's kind
say
of
here that, you know, discussion can occur in executive session and the vote would be done on an anonymous basis at the public meeting or something.
I would feel better if we could clarify that somehow. I don't know if anonymous is the right word, but I'd feel better if we could clarify that. Because this policy could be in place for quite some time after we're all off the board and we won't remember that.
But we're
Yeah,
talking about standard procedure. Standard procedure always involving any private information about a student, including their name, is always done in executive session. And votes are always occur in public session because you can't vote in executive session. So to say that, well, we're gonna vote in public is like redundant because we all know that. And we all know that any private information is always shared in executive session. And I feel like if the superintendent doesn't know that, why are they the superintendent? And
I'm
hopefully the
telling you,
board
it
chair would know that
happens.
too.
I'm telling you, it happens. It's not supposed to happen. It might be an oops moment. And I know that Craig would never, you know, be guilty of that slip, but it might make sense to just add comma, you know, taking FERPA precautions into account or something like that.
Karen, thoughts?
Applying FERPA protections to the public vote.
I mean, I guess it's a little superfluous, it can't hurt to add it.
It's a regulation, so I'll leave it up to you, Dr. Cook, because we don't write regulations, we just
Yeah,
read them.
I would tend to go with what Shipman has recommended here because we should always be taking FERPA regulations. We don't put that in other places. Do you know what I mean? Like there's lots of places I could add, you know, taking into account FERPA regulations and child privacy laws, things like that. Like I think that it's more than we need. And I do agree with Diane. It's similar, it'd be similar to very different scenario, but similar to a expulsionary process where you go through and have to be posted. I would honestly, because this has not come up, I would need to check, does that need to be like when you put information about executive session, you have to be more specific now than you ever used to have to be why you're going to executive session. So this would be for me a call to Tom Mooney or somebody at Shipman to say, how should this be listed on the agenda? And I think that anybody else, unless the next superintendent has handled it before, would do the same.
All right.
So
That's fine.
my consolation prize would be that because as a policy committee and also the Board of Ed, we don't vote on regulations, we only vote on policy. And we've decided to move the policy forward to the Board of Ed. When we do it, we always bring the associated regulation. We can bring it up to the full board for discussion about that. If the full board feels it needs to explicitly say that, we can run it by Shipman and Goodwin and get their opinion on it. And if so, then we can advise Dr. Cook to change it
Well,
to.
I don't know. After discussion, hearing Diane's perspective and especially hearing Craig's perspective, I'm fine rescinding my concern on that.
So my only other comment about this particular regulation was in lines 298 to 302. And this is the new paragraph. When a student is truant, the district shall implement the truancy intervention model developed by the State Department of Ed that accounts for mental and behavioral health. If the State Department of Ed has developed such a model, Do we know if the state has developed such a model?
They have not, we've been, really still in a gap after DCF kind of exited from this whole truancy process, like, we will still file DCF, concerns, complaints, reports. But, they have really backed off on getting involved unless it's very extreme cases, so we have very few tools beyond what the board's aware of, counseling, loss of credit at the high school, certain things, sending people, we do home visits, we do our best, but we don't have a lot of tools, so we're hoping at some point the State Department of Ed will be helpful. We don't have a model at this point.
Okay, so then if we pass this policy with regulation, it says in the regulation, otherwise, the district shall implement a truancy intervention plan that meets the requirements set forth in the general statute 10-198E. So, this regulation goes with the policy, the regulation is written. Do we say we don't have yet a truancy intervention plan?
Not under that title. We have procedures, but we'll have to look at that, in terms of what that should look like. Is it just taking our current procedures and calling them a truancy intervention plan?
Probably.
Yeah. Until the state comes out with
Because when
something,
this passes in
Yeah.
2 meetings.
right, yes,
Or actually 1 meeting, if we pass the policy and waive the second read, the regulation goes with it, it'll be at the next meeting.
yes,
So then perhaps the name should change to truancy intervention plan,
yes,
just so that we're in compliance with our own regulation.
absolutely.
Agreed, everyone? Okay,
Yeah.
moving on. I'm now bored with that.
Do you want 2 reads or what on the attendance?
I'm sorry, what?
For the attendance truancy policy, 2 reads or 1?
Say that again?
Do you want 2 reads or 1 on the policy?
Oh, 1. We're gonna ask for waiving of the second read for the policy, and the reg just goes with it. I'm sorry, I don't know why I couldn't comprehend what you said 3 times. Moving on, policy 6080.1.2, Title I program/parental involvement. You have a copy in your packet of the current policy, and then you have the new policy, which is now titled 6090, Title I Parent and Family Engagement, which I like, getting rid of all the dots. So I would just ask Dr. Cook to briefly mention what Title I is for anyone, for all of our listeners out there who would want to know what Title I involves, extremely briefly, and then we'll talk about policy.
Yes, federal grant that is available for school districts. We do not currently receive any money under Title I, so we're not required to follow the policy, but we've always had the policy in place. And previous to this year, we had always received funding. It can be directed towards basically reading and math, and typically you're identifying Title I specific schools that then the money goes to for support of students that are below grade level.
Okay, so the new policy, which would be 6090 Title I Parent and Family Engagement, is completely rewritten from the current policy. Does anyone have any questions or comments? This would obviously not be a waiving of a read because it's extremely different and extremely detailed as compared to the current policy. If you compared the two, very, very specific in the new policy of what needs to be done. So I guess my only question regarding this would be all of the requirements in the new policy of what school district needs to do regarding involvement of the parents and all that stuff. Is this anything new? Is everything that we've already been doing, so it's not like we need any new additional professional
Staff or
development
training or
yeah,
no.
it's all
no,
the same.
Yeah,
It's just
we've
in
been
the
doing it,
policy,
yes,
it's very
yeah.
specific. We're already doing all the things in the new policy.
right.
That was my only
Yeah,
question.
we already have done it and we'll do it.
Yes, okay.
hopefully next year.
That's what I thought, but I just figured I would
Yes.
ask for clarity.
Okay.
Clarifying question.
Can I ask a
Comments?
practical, yeah, can I ask a practical question? I know that this language was given to us by Shipman, and it's their drafted policy, and it probably closely follows statutory requirements under Title I, but because there is a reference to racial or ethnic minority background, even though that is what's in Title I, does this potentially, as a practical matter, mean that if we were to qualify again for Title I funding in the future, that we would not get money sent to us by the federal government under the current administration's Department of Education rules, and I think it was a presidential
I think so. Title
executive
I is
order.
federal, right? Title I is federal,
Yeah,
so it's their rule.
I know. I'm trying not to be,
DEI, which is
yeah,
not.
I'm
about
trying not to be,
Title I.
yeah, I'm trying not to be political about it, but as a practical matter, because there is a reference to race and ethnicity, is that going to be violative of the DEI order of the president that basically said that institutions under Title I should not get Title I funding if they have DEI programming? And maybe we don't know the answer to that. Maybe we're gonna find out.
You'd have to ask, someone in Washington.
They'll
Or
get
Ship,
right
I
on
mean,
that,
Shipman
too.
might not, I mean, that, yeah.
So this, according to Shipman and Goodwin, they recommend that we repeal our current policy, which is outdated, to this Shipman and Goodwin model policy, parent and family engagement for Title I students policy. So it's coming directly from our lawyers. I am assuming that if anything changes, we'll see it again and change it again. So for now,
That's-
this is
that's
the
all we can do.
policy.
Yeah, all right.
We'll just keep seeing it again and again and again. So we're good with that. That'll of course be 2 reads. Galen says
Yep.
good, Maureen, good. Moving on.
And hopefully this helps. And my read on that is really what we would be doing is, translating or having nights that, you look to appeal to the families, working with our EL population, for instance, to share with them what we're doing on Title I. I don't, I wouldn't feel that this falls under the concern of, what they were sharing about DEI, but I think that, we're safe having it in there. But again, that's why I said, you have to talk to somebody in Washington, because I would probably say that about other things that they would have concerns with.
Yeah, all right.
I don't see it as the same thing at all.
Well, I will say that the version that Shipman provided as opposed to the current policy is more tightly worded in that regard. I think it only has one reference to the whole thing about that, whereas it looks like our current policy may be a little bit more loosely constructed. So, if anything, it might be closer to what the current administration is looking for. But whatever, I mean, it is what it is, and we're not receiving money this year anyway, so,
All right, we're gonna move that forward for 2 reads.
yeah.
Policy 6100.10, selection of instructional materials. This is a revised policy of our current policy. They say the policy is not mandatory, but many school districts maintain policies on this topic. We obviously want to keep it. The board is not required by law to approve foundational instructional materials, but may instead designate this role to a committee. Of course, we have our student curriculum committee. The board should confirm that the Madison curriculum management cycle continues to be operational and applicable, and confirm that the teachers are required to serve on these committees, and this may implicate collective bargaining agreements. Because this policy addresses the adoption of curriculum materials, it should also reference changing textbooks, which Connecticut General Statute provides that the boards of ed may not change textbooks except by a 2/3 vote of all the members of the board after being given at least 1 week's written notice, and that verbiage is in the new policy. So I am assuming, because we did edits, that we want to keep this. A lot of it has been removed. It's a very short policy, but still will be 2 reads, I would imagine. Any thoughts, Maureen,
And what, if it should be 2 reads?
on anything? Anything you want to talk about?
Go for it.
I was gonna say Gail has reviewed the policy. I believe she spoke with Stephen as well.
Okay.
You'll notice her add in referencing CRC guidelines that, you know, would not be something Shipman put in there. That's something we added
Thank you,
to
Gail.
recognize that we have that council here in Madison. Sorry.
No, I was gonna ask about Gail. I think it's important to get board by at every stage, so.
So also, I mean, if lines 13 to 14, it says the teaching staff shall be invited to participate in the curriculum development process as defined in policy 6070.1 curriculum development, which we just passed. So I think it's pretty obvious we're including the teachers, the appropriate people. And when we did talk about policy 6070.1, I did run it by Stephen Pinn, the chair of curriculum. And also Gail approved it as well, so I think we're all good, but do we want to keep this 2 reads or 1 read? It's really not that verbose, most of it's been removed.
Maybe keep it 2 reads only because it also includes class size policy.
This isn't
We're not-
class size, this is a different policy. This is just selection of instructional materials, 6100.
Oh, I scrolled down further,
Okay.
sorry.
So, and also we're just changing the number too. It's currently 6100.10, and we're gonna change it to 6100, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, so I mean, if we say, waive the second read, if you look, the only changes is that we add the board instead of Madison Board of Ed. The line about adhering to our policy 6070.1, in keeping with Curriculum Review Council. And then the new Connecticut General Statute 10-229 about the adoption of the textbook, that is exactly the way it reads from the statute. Everything else has been removed. So thoughts, you want to do 2 or 1? There's 1, what do you say?
That sounds fine.
1, okay, so we'll waive the second read or ask.
You did show this to Gail, you said, and Stephen, right?
Yeah, well, the 6070.1, which was the actual curriculum
Yeah.
development policy,
Yes.
went by Gail and Stephen, and Gail added in line 16 and this one.
Okay,
So-
sounds good.
So we'll ask to waive a second read on this policy and move forward to the board. This is like the longest policy meeting in the world, okay.
Right.
So,
Uh,
so good.
I know,
We're still gonna have that time.
we're usually done by now. All right, let's pick up the pace here. All right, policy 6151, class size. You'll see edits have been made to this policy. This is rescinded in place. Not a lot of changes here. I don't know, thoughts, comments, questions?
Two comments, first of all, purposely left in level 3, we can take that out, as the board knows. Next year, we will have a level 3 at the high school for geometry and algebra 2. The year after that, we'll only have it, no, next year we'll only have it for algebra 2, and then that year after that, we won't have it at all. So I think rather than having to revisit this, I would recommend you take it out, but I want to leave it in there so we had that conversation. And you'll see then we lowered 1 and 2 because we still work hard to have those math classes be co-taught with a special educator, keep them class sizes low as possible. And I wanted to just reflect that in there, that we're going from 12 to 20 to 15 to 24. And then the other comment was, I should have caught this earlier, and this is my oversight, but I think that this was listed in a previous organization. So it should be grades 3 through 5, 19 to 24, even though the numbers are the same in grades 6 through 8, 19 to 24. I think this just makes sense to illustrate the different grade levels.
Yeah.
And then the last comment is just for the committee's purposes, and I'll say this again at the board level. We are sometimes over these, just based on students moving into town, larger classes going through, we, on average, we're typically lower or, on the lower end, but there are times where, say, fifth grade might have a class of be rare, or 25, or that, there's 22 kids in the second grade class, based on, student, moving within the grades or moving into town, things like that. So it's not a automatic trigger that if you get to 22, we have to hire another teacher mid-year. That's not how this works. We've never had an issue with that, but I think these are helpful for the administration, that kind of way. And as you see, when we look at the lower grades, we certainly want the lower classes there as much as possible.
How high
Yeah.
could it go? And just before you would say, oh gosh, great, I'm teaching.
I think that one piece I will say too, for us is at the elementary level, especially the lower, we do have another adult in the room, which is tremendously helpful. Had that before where we maybe added another adult if we didn't have the space. But we watch that all summer when students are enrolling, and hasn't happened in a couple years, but I think about 3 years ago, we did add an elementary class, at the start of the school year at Jeffrey because of the enrollment, and that was another kindergarten class. So, it's something we share with the board, on October 1. But I don't think there's any definitive, but anytime we're getting to those upper levels, we're watching it closely, definitely.
What does say the following class size guidelines
Yes.
are recommended,
Yep.
it's not written in stone, it's flexible. And, again, it doesn't, going over a number is not gonna trigger it, because that is a whole classroom and hiring another educator issue, that's a budget issue, that's not something that's just gonna. We're just gonna toss it.
Doesn't happen
Another
overnight, right?
salary.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
It's,
And then that would make two very small classes, so it'd be
right,
on.
and also
Yeah,
you would need the
oftentimes,
space,
yeah,
you
for
would
us,
need the
yeah.
space for an additional classroom, plus everything in it, that's a big deal.
yeah, it's very useful
But-
for me to point out to say, typically, this is the range, it's our policy, et cetera.
And when you
Yeah, I
look
think
at.
our policy,
kindergarten-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you look at kindergarten, first and second grade, if you got a new teacher at 22, you got 2 classes of 11, so you're below on that end, so it'd probably be. Below. Significantly higher, right?
Yeah, so Liz, I'm thinking of next year, I think we'll have 5 at Brown and then 6 at Neck River at some certain grade levels, so it doesn't alter it that much, but it definitely does change the sizes. But we frequently get, compliments from parents about the class sizes in Madison. I think we try and stay at the lower end as much as possible. And then again, like it's shared, the second adult there for academic purposes is really, really helpful.
I've heard that as well, and that's been added since my children were in the school. When my oldest was in first grade, there was only one, the parents were not in all of the classrooms like they are now, so that's wonderful, makes a big difference.
Seth, you wanted to make a point?
I just wanted to say, I think these express the preference of the Board of Ed to have, fair but not large, unmanageable class sizes, recognizing also that we do usually at the lower levels have an additional adult in the room. If that were to change, we might want to revisit these. And the other thing is, on the other end, in the high school, aren't there occasions, especially with the trimester model, where the students have a lot more class choice, that we want to allow, if there are 11 students or 12 students who want to take a particular course, we still want to allow them to be able to take that course. So I think there's good flexibility. If only 3 kids sign up, then that's not really economically feasible, maybe. But
Well, the policy does address that, in lines 18
Yeah.
to 20.
Exactly. So I think we're in a good place, to be honest.
And it also, the policy states that special education classes at the high school are not subject to the guidelines of this policy. They're organized in the best interest of the students. And about the scheduled classes at the high school having a minimum of 10 students in lines 18 to 20, the superintendent is authorized to override this requirement to ensure that student schedules are maintained and/or student graduation requirements are met. Advanced placement courses or courses limited by prerequisites are exempt from the minimum as well. I think everything is pretty much addressed in this. So the edits that we need to make to the policy then are in the box. It's pre-K, kindergarten, grades 1 and 2, and then it'll be grades 3 to 5 for the 19 to 24, and grades 6 to 8, 19 to 24. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then,
Under grades 9 through 12, let's discuss removing the level 3 if it's gonna be phased out in 2 years. Galen's good with cutting it, Maureen.
That's fine.
Okay, so we will remove level 3, 12 to 20, and it will just say grades 9 through 12, level 1 and 2, 15 to 24.
Thank you.
Got
real
that,
quick, Craig, lines
Yeah.
26 and 27, does anything need to be reviewed there in terms of the interdisciplinary team teaching model? Middle school,
26 and 27, is that what you said?
yes.
Yes, what was the question on it?
That refers to what's going to be, well, I guess there still is gonna be team teaching in grades 4 and 5. There's not gonna be team taught classes in 4 and 5 anymore, right?
No, there will, yeah. we
There
have the
will, there will.
teacher. Yes, same in 6th grade, and then 7th and 8th grade is that middle school model where you have a team of teachers. It's really a great model. It's kind of what
Yeah,
things that makes.
all right, but that doesn't change, and my point was only that's not gonna change this language at all. is it?
Correct, no,
Well,
no,
we have
we'll
no-
continue to maintain that.
All right, we're gonna move that on then to the board. Next policy, 6153 field trips. They recommend, administration would like to move this policy to the 5,000 student series. We're good with that. It'll become 5100.8. Instead of being called field trips, it'll be called student travel. What's this student travel / 6100.16.1 student travel? Does that need to stay?
All right, so this one gets a little messy. There's actually 3 student travel / field trip policies currently floating around. The current book of policies.
Nice.
So the one that exists in the 6,000s is currently, which is at the top of the packet, is what I would like to move to the 5,000s, and that will be the field trip policy. Then the other 2 policies floating around that encompass other field trip and student travel, we would like to bring into one document, keep the relevant and current parts of it, and make that a regulation to the field trip policy.
Okay, so
Did
in
you
the
follow
packet
that?
is current policy 6100.16.1. And so we're actually gonna get rid of those numbers,
Mhm.
because that will be wrapped into the new policy, which we're changing to 5100.8 student travel. Yes,
That's the regulation.
I have
If you want to-
instruction becomes students, 6153 becomes 5142 field trips. Then we have 5142. Is that a 0.8? No, it's crossed off. 5142 regulation, field trips and student travel. So the new thing is 5142 field trips in the student series. And its associated regulation, 5142 regulation field trips and student travel.
Yes,
Get rid of 6100.16.1 student travel.
yes.
So,
You should have seen me trying to figure out what we could do before I put it all together.
okay, so, moving it to the 5,000 series, renaming it student travel, combining all the other stuff into one and a regulation. This is the Shipman and Goodwin model field trips policy. The district may wish to develop an administrative regulations, which we did, for this policy to address some of the more specific provisions in the current policy, i.e. budgets, transportation, parent permission. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, so. Definitely recommend 2 reads. There's a lot going on here, even if it's a short policy. My only suggestion of edits is that in line 17, like we have done in all the other policies, it says superintendent or superintendent's designee. And then line 24, I think it should just reflect the same. It's missing the word superintendent for designee. That's my only edit.
I have just one question, which is, it says, in any event, we recommend prohibiting school staff from acting as quote private agents for non-school sponsored student travel. Give me an example of that.
So, some private agencies doing a trip geared towards students and the staff member works for them during the summer and they are advertising during the school year. Hasn't been an issue, but
Okay, I was thinking maybe to apply like coaches and travel teams
yep.
and things like that.
That's typically outside our purview, because that's,
Like you got a coach who's like
Yeah.
also an AU coach.
yeah, right. There's CIAC governs, how many students could potentially be on their AAU, that might be more likely to have happen per se, but, we don't have it at the same grade levels, because typically the high school coaches that are coaching AAU that I'm aware of are doing younger students.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Oh, and the only other thing I wanted to say about this policy was, when you compare the policy to the regulation, it specifically says in the policy that if it's an overnight field trip, it requires approval by the board, as well as like for raising funds. And then if you look at the regulation under line 29 to 30, it says student travel, which involves overnight accommodations or trips outside of the state for students, must be approved by the superintendent, but it doesn't say also the board. So do we want it to also say the board in the regulation, because it says so in the policy?
The policy should only be, the board only approves international travel program. So I will check that for the 5-point details, to make sure that wasn't.
Because this is in the policy lines 15 to 17, all student field trips shall require prior written approval by the building principal. In addition, all student field trips that are scheduled to last more than 1 day shall require the prior written approval of the superintendent or superintendent's designee and the board. So these differ in that one
Okay,
thing.
yeah.
I'll check that, an error on my part.
Yeah, we
Okay.
take off and the board, for instance, like
So-
5 going down to.
Yeah.
I don't know, Nashville, that was the board approved one, that was.
Okay.
Well,
So it
well,
really
we're talking about our current practice, but did Shipman recommend that we add a board approval there? I'm not looking for the board to have to do more at a meeting.
No,
But-
that was my typo.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right, so it should not say and the board in the
Correct.
policy in line 17,
Correct.
and therefore does not say it in the regulation, is that correct?
Yes, yep,
Okay, so let's make that change in the policy, line 17. It will end after superintendent's designee, line 17,
thank you.
yeah, and then it would stay the same in the regulation, lines 29 and 30, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so the policy,
Here's the question, I'm
Yes.
surprised, I don't see anyone, or maybe it's somewhere else. Like it talks about the fundraising that's done from it, or fundraising from public and things like that. But I don't see anything about how that money's managed.
We have a fundraising.
We have a
policy
fundraising
that
policy.
does that.
That talks about.
Yes.
yeah, just similar to that. We did that one
A year
a
ago.
year ago, yeah. That, what section is that? Fundraising policy, is it in
To the
the,
5,000.
okay,
To look at that in relation to this, because I don't remember that specifically.
it is very specific in that policy, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's definitely spelled out in that policy.
There's also a policy in the 2000s or the 3000s regarding money in school buildings that is further specifies what you do with that sort of.
You remember we talked about it, about like how to designate, like how much money? We had like a huge discussion.
Yeah, I guess I
Everything
just
about,
wasn't thinking about it in terms of field trips and international travel and things like that. I wasn't thinking of it in those terms at the time.
okay, so we made the changes to the policy and no changes to the regulation. Does anyone have any other comments or questions regarding the policy or the regulation, or can we move this forward to the board? It'll be a 2-read, I would think. Seth is saying yes.
Yeah, I definitely would like to, because I want to spend some time looking
Sure.
at that other one, so I definitely would ask the 2 reads.
But yeah, I mean, we'll move it forward, we can bring it up if, to discuss that at the board level if you want. And that is the last policy on the agenda tonight.
There you go.
7:34, we went over, people.
There's no public comment.